Welcome to the Metal Detecting Podcast, brought to you by XP Metal Detectors. We're digging the plugs and pinpointing the topics you want to hear. Now here's your hosts, Dave Kimball and Grant Hansen.
This show is brought to you by XP Metal Detectors. XP Metal Detectors is a high-end, innovative metal detector company with high-end metal detectors, coils, and pinpointers. For more information, go to xpmetaldetectors.com. For a dealer near you, try a Google search or go to xpteamusa.com. Hello and welcome to the Metal Detecting Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kimball, coming to you from Central Oklahoma, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Grant Hansen, coming to you from New Jersey. How you doing, Grant?
I'm doing very well. Just plugging away, keeping doing my thing and trying to get out detecting as much as possible. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Hanging with it. It's getting nice out. Yeah. Ready to go detecting.
Yes, it is. And we've had a pretty mild winter as it is. So I'm hoping March warms up even quickly, but, haven't really had to deal with too much frozen ground. I've got some permissions lined up. They're all small properties, but enough to keep me busy for a little bit. So I'm excited.
Oh, yeah. I predict that March and April, we're going to see a lot of finds coming through our Facebook page.
Yeah, I think so. We're already starting to see some really good ones. And I'm kind of, getting anxious to get out there.
Oh, yeah. They have announced the XP 280 backpack and finds pouch is now out and available. Is that right?
It is. I've actually got the backpack. So you'll see a lot of my videos with me wearing it. And I'm going to do a video on it just to show everybody what I pack and carry with me, because I'm Mr. Preparedness. I want to have everything, and everything fits in there nicely, and it's got a bunch of adjustment straps, so you can really personalize the fit, so it doesn't feel like you're wearing this giant thing.
Oh yeah, it looks pretty cool. You could fit a lot of stuff in there. It'd be nice to have extra coils with you while you're out in the field. You can while you're hunting, you could just switch a coil right in the middle of your field, and you don't have to walk back to the truck or anything.
Yeah, I like to do that. Usually I start off with the HF round coil and then hit a spot. And then I'll go back and I'll take my my X35 and I'll put it in a really low frequency and scan the same area just to see if something else comes up. It's kind of like checking it out with two different detectors.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we also got some new YouTube videos out there. So go on YouTube and check out XP Team USA.
Yeah, we've got some great videos, more on the way, and I'm sure we'll even start seeing more now that spring's in the air, and we'll probably get to see a lot more from the Minnesota Beach Boys as soon as their lakes unfreeze. I don't know when that is, but I know they're anxious to get out there and start filming.
Yeah, I know they are. They're even out there finding people's phones and stuff in the snow.
Yeah, I saw that. What a great service they provided. I think the phone was unfortunately destroyed, but I think they did find it.
Yeah. So I had a few requests and some people asking me, hey, whatever happened to Express News? And as we all know, Grant here used to do the Express News. He started out on this podcast doing the Express News, and he did a great job, and it was really, really hard to fill Grant's shoes on that Express News. But we finally got it back. We got it going, and now we got Kendall Edkins running the Express News, and he does a great job, and it will be featured on this show.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be on later in the show. Kendall did a fantastic job with it. He's got a great voice. He got some great stories to share with everybody. So I hope everyone really enjoys it.
Yeah, so on today's show, we talked with Dennis Wynne. Dennis Wynne is from Texas, and this guy had written a book about ghost towns and other old spots in Texas, and he's put a lot of work into this thing, and he had it out for sale on Amazon, but Amazon pulled it off the shelves, and because he needed more references on it, actually he pulled it off the shelves, but because he needed to do some more references. So he's in the middle of rewriting it and putting more references in there and pulling some stuff out, but he's actually adding to it also. And this is a really cool book, and he has a lot of cool hunting techniques. So we're going to be talking to him today.
Yeah, he's a super interesting character, and his book is just ginormous, just filled with thousands of different historical sites across Texas. And he's a very interesting person. He's an inventor and, all around very interesting guy. So I'm excited to speak with him.
Yeah. All right. So when we come back, we'll talk with Dennis Wynne. If you are looking for more information about XP products such as dealers or updates, then check out MetalDetectorsAmericas.com.
Hello, this is Daniel from XP Metal Detectors Americas, and I just wanted to let you know about the XP Metal Detectors Americas.com website, which is full of information on the K-use metal detector and the ORX metal detector. Both are wireless and do all aspects of metal detecting, which is gold prospecting, coins, jewelry, and relics.
Today we welcome a guest who is a historian, an author, inventor, and all-around very interesting guy. He is an author of a 972-page reference book of 2,700 historical sites across Texas. Let's give a warm welcome to Dennis Wynne. How you doing, Dennis?
I'm doing fine. Thank you guys for having me on your show here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And again, welcome to the show. 972 pages. I can say, wow. And we'll get into your book in just a minute. But first, would you mind giving us a little introduction about yourself so our listeners can get to know a little bit more about you?
Sure, glad to. Again, I'm Dennis Wynne. I'm been metal detecting for just over 46 years now, and I got started back in 1974. And I guess the first thing I ever found was a buffalo nickel at a local place in Fort Worth, Texas. But I have always loved history, and I was soon drawn to go out in the country, and I was a very early on person that knocks on doors, and that kind of got me started with this project that became the book and became a passion of mine. As I've gotten older at this stage in life, I came to realize that I'd never be able to visit every site that I had researched through the years. And so this became a point of coming about and writing the book and being able to share it with different people. But I've had the opportunity. I was a professional firefighter at the city of Fort Worth, and I was fortunate enough to have a lot of time off with my schedule. And when I was a young man, every day I was out metal detecting. I've traveled all over the United States. I've hunted ghost towns. I've hunted gold. I've been up into Canada and Alaska, and I've had a lot of opportunities, primarily because of my job. And then when I retired at the ripe young age of 50, it just became almost a full-time passion. And so it just became something that I've enjoyed early on in life. And from that first nickel that I found up until now, it's been a great hobby for me. So that's kind of my background there.
As the title of your book said, you've cataloged 2,700 sites across Texas. What was the criteria that each of these sites had to meet in order to get on the list?
Well, I started out back in 1970s. I started doing research on those ghost towns at the local library level and talking to historians. That evolved actually out of doing the door knocking. And the criteria, there's actually a little over 3,200 sites at this juncture. The book has just grown and grown, and so has the map. I have a Google Earth map that has icons on there that represent all of the places. To get on there, it could be anything from ghost towns to battles in Texas. It could also be historic sites where someone famous possibly lived, or springs, ferries, river crossings, documented historical places across Texas. And it just gave me a great opportunity to visit many places around the state and meet a lot of great people and have the opportunity to hunt the ghost towns that used to be where railroads went through or where military roads went through. And starting probably about 1980, I started cataloging all the places that I heard about and learned about by talking to older people. So the criteria is just if it was old enough, then it probably would end up somewhere in this book and the map as well.
That's very interesting. When you say you've cataloged stuff based on what you've heard about and learned about, is that coming from just one-on-one conversations, or were you diving deep into like historical documents to find these things?
Both, and actually, the one-on-one conversation was quite often the start of something, and the diving into it to find the history that actually evolved. And the way that I accomplished that was I would have a folder for each county, and then as I visited somewhere near there, I would go into the libraries and I would talk to people, and I would find the information I was looking for, if it was in books or old newspapers, possibly just the old timers in the area. And so that's how I cataloged everything. And back in the day, it was a lot harder than it is now, because we have many more tools at our disposal.
So in your book, you've cataloged a bit of ghost towns, like you said, and a lot of people think that old ghost towns are abandoned mine communities and everything else. But like you mentioned, railways and everything, which we got a lot of those in Oklahoma, old towns that have disappeared because of the railway moved or did not appear in the town like they were promised. So what type of properties have you seen as ghost towns in Texas?
Well, the properties themselves are on ranches now. Some of them underneath where urban sprawl has brought about covering them. But a lot of times they're on ranches, and the way that I find them and get them cataloged with the latitude and longitude, I'll find out who the owner is, and I go knocking on doors or calling them up and telling them what I'm about. A lot of what you just mentioned, the railroads that would come through, and they would anticipate where the railroad was going to go, and some rancher back in the day would buy property or get it granted to him here in Texas. And then he would try and start a town there. They'd dedicate land for a school and for a cemetery, and he'd start a store, and he'd sell lots basically back east and encourage people to move out. Nowadays, a lot of these are covered over. When we think about ghost towns, they're not like we have modern-day towns of thousands. Back in the day in Texas, quite a lot of them were 15 houses around there in their general store and a saloon and various things, up to several hundred people that would live there. So it varied from site to site. And that's part of the great thing about hunting them and looking for them and pinpointing right where they were, is finding those old sites. And most of them have not been hit by people even today with a metal detector. And that's a great part about hunting ghost towns to me.
Yes, right. And I know here in Oklahoma we have a lot of those sites are now oil fields. Do you have a problem there in Texas?
Yeah, we have a lot of gas wells and oil wells, but they're still owned by private property or private owners here in Texas to a large degree. And as long as they're on private hands, I generally talk to the owners of the actual property. And I have not had much difficulty getting on most properties. I look a little bit like Santa Claus, and I think they're probably concerned that I might not give them something for Christmas, you know? So.
That's funny. So of the 3,200 plus properties that you've been cataloging, how old is the oldest site, and what is the most modern one?
The oldest site probably I have on record is probably from about 1740, I believe. It's down along the Mexican border.
Wow, yeah.
The newest that I have is probably from about 1935 or so. And that was an example, actually, of a boom town, which technically I would classify it as a ghost town because people were there for numerous years. And one of the big things about the oil boom towns in Texas, they were occupied quite a bit by the Italian folks that came over, some Irish folks that came over, and inevitably, just as happens in any old town, when people get together, they tended back in the day to have a lot of gambling, perhaps, and some alcohol, and the ladies of the evening even. So there was a lot of money that was around then, even if it was scrip from the coal industry, for example. They would still have some money, and sometimes not necessarily money. It could be a gold chain, but that stuff is in those areas, and then subsequently it's lost. So I think that those are, I would classify those as ghost towns as well myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a good example of that is a town, Caddo, which is west of the Metroplex here. And during the day, in fact, there's two that are there. But back in the day, in the early 1900s, the population there in Thurber, Texas, was another one. The population got up to be about 30,000 people for a span of years, about 5 to 10 years. And the same type of things you would run into would exist there, just like it would for the towns that existed 5 or 10 years and missed the railroad and get moved to the railroads. And that's one of the key things too, is finding where it originally was. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the ghost towns across Texas, there's an amazing number as America moved westward. And where I live, west of Fort Worth in Parker County, we were on the cutting edge of the Indian raids of the latter 1800s, and that actually had a shaping of where ghost towns are now, because people would go out, and it was on the cutting edge of civilization, if you will, and through Indian raids, they would tend to go back into small towns such as Palo Pinto, and which used to be Golgotha was the name of it before it's Palo Pinto, but it's a town that was right at the edge of Western civilization. And so towns would start up past that by the ranchers who would start those towns, as I described earlier, and they would have a place that was given for a church and a school and a cemetery, and start a general merchandise store and try and start a town. Those are the most fun to find. They're also the most difficult, because some of them you only find reference in a book somewhere, say from one of the universities or the state of Texas archives. So when you find those have to go in the county, and then you have to talk to the local historians and people like that to find them.
Yeah, when you were talking about the towns that used to be kind of a party town, it made me think of one of the towns there that was actually never did go away, but was it Sherman? Wasn't that was a big party town back in the 1800s, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And Sherman is still intact as a town today. In fact, that probably has one of my favorite places to go to on the outskirts. Towns, just like individual settlers back in the day, they tended to settle along the creeks and the rivers, and that makes it a little bit easier to find them. When you said party town, I just knew you were going to say LaGrange, Texas, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with LaGrange, but it was a small town, and it was known as, let's see, ZZ Top sang a song about it one time.
Yeah.
But it was a great example. It shrunk down, and there's still people there, but the old town shrunk from where it was, and it was moved a little bit. But there's history all through there. So the party towns, and LaGrange is probably considered a party town in the early 1900s. But anywhere that people gathered, just like anywhere else in the U.S., where people gathered, they tended to do certain things, and they lost certain things. And one of the things I like about the ghost town hunting is a lot of relics there, and every once in a while you'll find that nugget that you don't find anywhere else. In fact, one of my favorite coins I have found was up out of a small town called Hiram, and it's a counterfeit 1854 silver dollar, and it's got pits on the back. And one of the things I love about that, it doesn't weigh as much as it should, and it's actually silver. But on the back side, you can see where it was counterfeited. But that's the type of stuff you find in old ghost towns, especially. You find things you don't normally find anywhere else, to me.
Wow. And do you find a lot of like tokens too that were for the, the shops that they set up in the areas?
Absolutely. That probably I would find more tokens for local saloons and anywhere within about a 20-mile radius, maybe 25 miles. They were there, and you would find tokens. And those are really the ones that people like to collect.
How does the book list each site? In other words, what information is included?
What I tried to do with the book was I gave latitude and longitude in decimal format as closely as I could determine the site to be, either by visiting it or through research. Then also, it would have a little biographical blurb with it. In fact, that is what actually blew the book up to a gargantuan size. And we're tapping an 8x10 book page was about 1,157, I believe, pages, which is very considerable. Printing it on paper became prohibitive because of the price. It would have had to be on the market, if you would. But I gave it information, anybody that was important that might be a part of Texas history that lived there. I gave the latitude and longitude, and I gave a historical biography of that site to help people. I could have included the regular landowner, the modern landowners, but I really didn't want to do that. And one of the caveats of even approaching that kind of site is Texas, obviously every bit of the property is owned by someone. And so, you got to encourage folks, you've got to get permission. It gets pretty bad if you don't.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be trespassing on somebody's ranch, that's for sure. When you were marking the latitude and longitude coordinates, were you kind of using your phone to drop a pin and then you would get it that way? Were you using maps? How did you try to get that information?
Well, if I was present on the site, I have got, let me find it right quick. I have got a program that I use on there. I can't think of the name of it right now. I do. I've got a precision GPS that's on my Apple iPhone, and it gets it to like 10 decimal points. And so if I'm out on site, that's what I do. And when I'm looking for towns, I'm kind of a techno geek, I suppose is a good term for it. I use everything from Google Earth to aerial photos. I also, when I get out in the field, I actually have a drone. I know y'all had been talking about drones somewhat. Mm-hmm. I've got a drone with a high-resolution thermal camera underneath it, and if I'm actually looking for something, I do flyovers up to about an hour after sundown, and things light up pretty well after dark with the thermal camera. And then I also utilize a hyperspatial camera. So when I'm looking for a place, I get all the information I can. And if I'm on site and I have permission, I run through the ground. I ask the people that live there. And once I get it, I'll go to the site and I'll wander around. I'll look for evidence of habitation, such as old pottery shards and stuff. Then I will grab the site off of there once I determine as closely as I can where it is.
So this sounds like a great resource for metal detectorists in and all around Texas. Is this book available for purchase right now?
It is not. I know you and I have talked about that a little bit. Amazon had it on there for about a year and a half, and we put it out there as an electronic version. And after a year and a half, Amazon came and they approached me, and a lot of these sites are from the early 1800s and even back in the 1700s, as I said earlier, and they actually wanted me to give them the date of death of any citations that I made or any bibliographical references for the original author. And that was quite, it would require a lot of more research. And so basically at that point, they hijacked another copy of my book, is about the way I know to put it, and put it just with the latitude and longitude and no biographical references in it. And so I yanked it off the shelves, basically. And it's currently being rewritten, and I've got it all divided up by counties. And right now, I think I'm in letter M right now for the counties in Texas. So I'm almost halfway through with a total rewrite, and I'll do away with the citations at that point.
Yeah, I've never sold through them, but I do hear that, they can be a challenge, and sometimes they dictate the price. You might want to sell something at $10, and all of a sudden they're listing it at $5 or $6.
Yeah, we had a price point at $39.95 for that book, but no one else has done what we managed to accomplish in the process. And it 1,100 pages book, and it's 1,100 plus, but you can't go out and buy it for anywhere near that. And then they basically took a outline would be a great word for that. And I'd submitted that for their initial review. So they put that online, and that did not fulfill what I was trying to share with everybody.
Great price. I mean, this is an ebook, right?
Yes, it was an ebook.
Yeah, that's still a pretty good price for all that research. And
yeah, really.
Else.
And we'll be right back with Dennis Wynne.
XP has introduced its new ORX machine, a high-end machine at a mid-range price. The ORX has 4 factory preset programs, 2 gold, 2 coins, also 2 user programs. The ORX comes with a high-frequency coil and is compatible with the X35 coils. The ORX is now available in the USA.
Hi, this is Dave D.
Hi, this is Sonia.
R.C. Dunn.
This is Alan. Yeah. We're the Minnesota Beach Boys.
This is Kendall.
This is David Kimball.
This is Grant Hansen. D-Center.
Lynn Quelland.
Hi, this is John.
Josh Kimmel.
Cameron Macer.
Pete Sorrell.
And we are
XP Team USA.
And you are listening to the Metal Detecting Podcast.
And we're back with Dennis Wynne. So, in addition to being an author and historian, I hear that you're also an inventor. Can you tell us about what you're working on for the metal detecting community, or is that top secret?
Well, no, I don't mind sharing. At about 64 or so, I had problems in my right knee, and I started having trouble getting up and down. And I've always been a tinkerer, and my whole life I've done different things. And when I started having that specific problem, I wanted to think of a way that I could assist myself. And I'm like a lot of people. I use a leash or a predator tools to dig a horseshoe and flip it over when I'm looking, if I'm looking for coins on someone's property, or if I'm out in the field. And the getting up and getting down was a part that was difficult on my right knee. And so what I did is I cast in aluminum a clamp that has a fold-down handle on it that clamps to the shovel about 12 inches below the T-handle, in this case, on my shovels that I have. And when I get a signal and I have to get down on my knee to retrieve it, then getting back up, I simply fold this handle down and grab hold of it and stand up. And it's called a grab and stand. It's not on the market yet. We're probably in production. I think about 45 days from now, it will be actually in production. But in addition to that, once it's on a shovel, the other feature that it will allow you to do is instead of putting the metal detector on the top of a T-handle or on the shovel where it'll fall off, when you fold this down, you can put it on that. It's lower to the ground, keeps your metal detector. You can hang a canteen or something on it. The thing I like best about it is that if you've got to go through a fence to be on property where you have permission, you can actually use the handle folded up and the foot plate for your foot, and you can spread the barbed wire or the straight wire or whatever it is and give yourself a place to go through much more easily. And I've even thought about putting a bottle opener on it, but I think that's a little bit too carnival for me. I don't know. But
never could go wrong with that.
if I were to characterize, and here's the beauty about it, I am not the only person that's having that issue with my knees. And as we get older, we see the end time of when we're going to be able to metal detect. If I were to characterize what this device does, I would say it makes it somewhere between 65 and 75% easier for me to get up and down, which translates to more years in the field that I can enjoy this great hobby, And if it's that way for me, it's that way for everybody. The few people that have seen the prototypes, we went through 8 renditions of the prototype to get where we are today. And the people that have seen it, and I had several folks use it, are just thrilled with it. And they understand the concept. And it's kind of like the book, actually. It's my way of trying to give back to the metal detecting community. And the one thing I do appreciate at 67 is a few more years of metal detecting is a great thing to me at this stage in my life. I can't do the things I used to do.
Yeah.
But this will extend it.
Yeah, I know a few guys that got the same problem, and I'm sure they would love to have something like that.
Well, hopefully they'll buy it. Y'all hear that and watch for it about 45 days. It's grabbing stand. So, that's the name of it. A great name too, huh?
Yeah, I like it.
All right. Yeah. So all your inventions, do you have another invention involving landscaping or gardening?
Well, the same invention, actually, that's a larger market. When I started it on the grabbing stand, the larger market's going to be landscapers or gardeners, either one, that'll be using that device. Because at the end of the day, even young landscapers are pretty worn out. So that will equate to a larger audience. And ultimately, I've made 2 changes to it. And as far-fetched as this sounds, we're actually right now in the second prototype stage for a modified grabbing stand to go on to a walker like the aged people use. So if they fall, it'll help them to get up as long as they've got enough strength to do that. And that one, we're several years away from that because we got to put it through Medicare. But hopefully that's going to come about as well. So it's the concept is a great concept no matter how you look at it. And to help someone to get up, my experience so far has just been nothing but positive, that people that have tried it, that they've had to say. So, and then I've got another invention that's coming out. I can't really talk about that yet. We're in the early modifications, but it's another thing. I love using a 15 or 17 inch coil on some of my detectors, or the 13 inch on the XP Deus. And I've got a bad right shoulder. And at the end of the day, I'm worn out. So they have like the certain devices that'll help you keep them level. But the problem with that is the center of gravity is way too close to your body. And so this new invention that's currently in development, I've had it and personally used it for about 7 years. But it's going to throw the center of gravity forward, and you can literally metal detect with the biggest coil you can imagine with 2 fingers all day long and have a parallel to the ground sweep. Oh, yeah. So that's all I can say about that one right now. But it's coming.
Yeah. Well, here's one for you. You can work on too. You can have a little drone that follows you around and just digs your plug for you.
Yeah. The way I've flown my drone in the ground more than once, but that's a sad story too. But yeah, and that would be cool. Instead, I've got a grandson that might need to come along with me and do that. Guys, I'd like to really talk about some of the tools that I use in looking for locations of ghost towns. Yeah. Whether I'm looking, say on Google, or if I don't know how many people use some of the tools I use, but for instance, I use one that is a screen protractor, and it floats on your screen, and it lets you take measurement. If you can get a scale at a certain distance from a topo map, then you can actually use this. It's called screen calipers, and I've got that, and then there's another screen compass and screen protractor. And as silly as this sounds, when you're dealing with maps online especially, and you're trying to shape them, it's a good device to have, that as long as you leave it on the scale, you can measure distances quite precisely with it. And then I also use a tool. It's called actual transparent windows. Are y'all familiar with that?
No.
Seen that?
Yes, I am. It overlays an old map over a new map.
It overlays anything over there, but in point of reference, that map would be a great point of reference. And when I'm trying to find a ghost town or a small community of any kind, it allows me to get up close in Google Earth and then to overlay that image, and then I can set the transparency down to 10% or whatever and still see it through it, and that's a great asset to have when you're trying to line things up, because you're trying to line a two-dimensional object into Google Earth, which has the three-dimensional aspect, and so it makes it a little bit easier.
Oh yes, and you got all the right stuff too, because once you get that to that point where you're actually on the ground to where you believe you're at on the map, the old map, then you can fly your drone up and really pinpoint the spot. Is that right?
Exactly. The drone flying, when I fly a drone with just a regular imaging on it, I tend to fly early in the morning, and more than any other part of the day. It's either early morning or late evening, so you get a little bit more reflectivity and shadow on the highlights in the ground that you're looking for stuff, and it works a lot better next to the thermal imaging that I use. And generally for thermal imaging, I fly at about 40 feet or so, and that way I've got each pixel is about between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch on my screen when I'm looking at it, so I can see really good detail. But flying any drone that gives you high resolution video, if you catch it early morning, late evening, you'll get the shadow amplification that just gives you a better image to look at with that. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that I've not got, it's in my bucket list to have. I'm going to have to upgrade my drone, but they make differential gradiometers or magnetometers that will you'll be able to fly. Typically, they fly at about 1 meter, and the great part about that is that you'll be able to see the iron in the ground that's typical from a ghost town area where people congregated. You're going to have a lot of iron in the ground, right, from different things. Yeah. And so you'll be able to see it. And the beauty about whether it's a regular drone, the thermal imaging, the magnetometer, whatever, nowadays you get the GPS coordinates for it and you grid it and you can walk right up to it. And that's always a good thing.
Oh, yeah. Right. Do you find like different parts of the day is best to use the thermal imaging, like whenever the sun just comes up and all it starts heating up the surface, but everything else is still cold?
Yeah. When I fly normally with the thermal drone, I'll fly within about 30 minutes after sundown, and I want it to heat up all day, and I prefer to fly in the late summer. But by doing that, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour after sundown, that to me is the best window, and you can go a little bit longer. It depends on what you're looking for. Right now, I have been working on 4 years now for a large cache of gold coins. Doesn't have anything to do with ghost towns per se, but it's a good example because I would expect or I anticipate being able to see where the gentleman that buried the coins actually dug the hole. That's the goal. And I just now secured permission to be on the property where in 4 years I believe it's on after all the research I've done. But that's another story. But anyway, the thermal camera, if you go after dark, it works much better to me than it does in early morning hours.
So what's the coolest things you found while using these technologies?
Oh, good Lord. The probably the best find that I've ever found in a ghost town was a cache of coins. All of them are pre-1900. There were two $20 gold pieces in it. And it was, I found the ghost town and I stumbled onto a small cache that was it was $23 and some change. And I thought, where there's one, there's likely to be another. And so the second time I came back and I actually found what we classically look for of a fence post that was down with the horseshoe nails that were not into the wood where they unhooked the wire. And it was flat on the ground, but I focused then. And the cache that I found then It was $323.81, and it was all pre-1900 coins. There were some seeded in there, and then there was two $20 gold pieces in there as well. And you figure, that's somebody's life. So as far as a ghost town, that stands out as the most interesting and the best find that I've had there. In the old towns or old sites in general, probably I found a gold and ruby ring that dates probably about 1780 or so, as near as I can tell. Oh, wow. And that was from just an old site I was there because I thought there was a ghost town, but I stumbled into it. And that's a great find to have for anybody.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. One of the other things that stands out in ghost towns right quickly is post-Civil War, those soldiers, when they left that war, they brought the stuff they had with them to their homes after that war. And so a lot of them, it was like a belt buckle. It was just a belt buckle to them, or breastplate or whatever. And so you end up finding quite a few of those around the old ghost towns because that's where they were. And when they had been there post-Civil War, say 20 years or so, they get tired of that belt buckle because it's just a belt buckle, and it would end up doing something else or being somewhere else. So you find a lot of Civil War artifacts, or at least I do, when I'm out like that. And that's always a great thing.
Do you come across your fair share of Civil War encampments?
I do chase the encampments, and most of the artifacts that I have found Civil War, unless I'm looking for encampments in general, had been individuals' houses. Again, because as I said, people, when they left the war, they took what they had on with them. They weren't like we are now, where they got 4 or 5 belts and 8 pairs of shoes and all that. Mm-hmm. So that was just everyday wear. And they would lose them through time for various reasons. So there's a lot of Civil War artifacts at the individual house, but the whole point, I guess, what I make as it relates to the ghost towns is those same people would migrate to ghost town, or what was then a up-and-coming town. And when it shut down and they moved everything, they moved off. Sometimes they'd leave their stuff. I've had a lot of abandoned sites that I've come across where ghost towns were, an old shack that if you're willing to dig around and get through all the square nails, that's one of the things the XP Deus is so good about, to me, is it really gets in there and gets through that stuff really well. And if you're willing to do that and stay with it, there's a lot of stuff they left behind that I like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sure. So you've mentioned drones, you've mentioned mapping softwares and things like that. Is there any other tools of the trade that you use to do your research to find things?
Oh, sure. Yeah, in terms of sites, I use newspaperarchive.com. I use the federal government to look at different places. Down in Fort Worth, south of Fort Worth in Hillsboro, is one of the largest repositories of the Confederate records in America. And so that's close by. So in Texas, from the land grants, everything's divided up into Spanish measurements, if you will, varas, and they're different terms, but it's not set like it is in the rest of the country. And so it works out basically to every 80 acres, you should have a homestead there, or you can find the community, for instance, where rivers come together tends to be an area for a ghost town or close by that. So I use historicaerials.com. I use them, and I'm a big believer in the aerial photos that we can get from those guys. And then I do actual transparent window, and I compare those to modern topo maps as well as modern aerial photos and Google Earth and whatever else I can get my hands on. Through the years, I have collected physical maps. I probably have 150 or 200 of them at least, that are counties here in Texas that date back in the 1800s for the plat maps that show me the owners. That's a really big thing when you go to look and doing research for something, is to have those old plat maps. And it's actually quite laborious to go and have to go through each section on that map to look for a particular landowner. And it's a pain, but sometimes you got to do that because there's no other way to get that information. And when you're looking for a town, you might see the owner that started the town. So it's one of the ways you can narrow down where that town was if you don't have any other information. If you can get a time frame for it, get a plat map, and look up the owner who started that town, then you can come across it a little bit more easily because it's going to be right there where his land was.
Got it.
And there's probably some other tools that I use as well. Perry Castaneda down at UT Austin has got an immense collection of maps and documents, and I use that quite a bit. And one other source that pops in my mind, if you go to books.google.com, you can actually look up some really old books, and you can go and look and see for a particular book. You can search it by title, you can search it by subject matter, whatever, and you can qualify the date. And the beauty about it is that if you can't buy the actual book itself, you can many times get it printed by Harvard Press. And a good example was what I was looking for was a book that was printed originally in 1857, and I got a printed copy of about 1,200 pages, and it cost me $7 and some change for them to do it, and I got a paperback copy of it. So when you're researching and you're looking, in this instance, I was looking for a owner of some slaves and where his plantation was, because it developed into a small community in East Texas along the bayous. And so I was able to get that book and research that, and it helped narrow down that particular port. And when you can do that and get those older books, that's a great source as well for information. So to me, whether it was when I first started 46 years ago or even today, the other big factor, I talk to a lot of people. And when I go into a town, I want to know who the oldest people are there, because they're going to have memories of where the older towns may have been. They can even tell you beyond the ghost towns. They can tell you carnival sites where people are baptized or swimming or whatever. But it's a good source for a lot of information that we don't see in the history books anymore. And so I think that's just a great resource as well.
Amazing information. And thanks for sharing that with us, because I know a lot of our listeners, and myself included, are really going to take these ideas and really take our research to the next level.
Yeah, most definitely. This is, very interesting stuff. The book thing, I have tried that before on doing, but it wasn't from Harvard Press. It was, I can't remember where it was from, but it was a book. I don't know, I was doing some genealogy on my family, and I was able to print out a book that was not printed anymore, and that's a good resource.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Another one they do like that, I think it Indiegogo is another one. I want to say that's it. But regardless, any older information that you can get your hands on is just great research material. And by doing like I did, I fortunately started a good process. Is I actually have a paper 3-tab folder, if you will, the kind that we used to bend over the metal, and I've got it on 252 counties in Texas. And every time I come up with a bit of information that's pertaining to a person or a place or a ghost town, it goes in that particular folder. And after 46 years, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in all of them.
Hey, I'm going to switch gears here for a minute, because I've got a question. Is it true that you have a bobcat as a pet?
The rumor got around. Yes, I do. Yeah.
I would love to know the story
bobcat.
behind that.
Well, actually, she came out of Montana. She was a rescue cat. Her name is Tasha, and she is 11 years old and some change now. And she is the most interesting animal I've ever had. And she's smarter than I am, because she has me feeding her 3 or 4 times a day, and she hadn't cooked me a single thing. So.
Oh, it must be very interesting. Are bobcats like affectionate, like domesticated house cats, or?
If you get them young enough and you train them up a little bit. I have 2 mentors that have helped me with this cat, and bobcats happen to bond very closely with human beings. And Tasha has 4 friends that are other kitty cats that she hasn't eaten them yet. So after 11 years, they're probably pretty good friends.
Yeah.
And they're not bad. You know, they're an interesting animal to have. She's the smartest animal I've ever had. And she doesn't really have too many bad habits. She did hit my mother-in-law one time pretty good, but the evil me was saying, "You bet, do that again," you know.
That was part of the training.
Y'all might not ought to put that in there.
So if somebody on here wants to buy one of your books or one of your inventions, how can they find out when it's ready and where they can buy it?
Well, they're welcome to email me, and I've got an email and I'll respond pretty quickly, but historicaltexan@gmail.com.
Great.
Pretty easy.
Okay.
And if they're interested in that, I will have a self-standing website that'll be dedicated to the grabbage stand, and it'll probably be on Facebook as well.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of your hunting buddies around there is a guy we had on the show at one time, Mr. David Finley. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I know David. Yeah. I taught David how to knock on doors. He had to learn that pretty late in life. But yeah, David and I go every once in a while, we're planning a trip right now. We're going to travel somewhere either up in Oklahoma or maybe going east in Louisiana and go for 5 or 6 days and just door knock. But he's a good guy.
Yeah, if y'all come up around Oklahoma City, let me know. I'll come out and hunt with you.
All right. No, you'll tell us to the prime place, won't you?
Yeah, sure
No.
will.
I thought you said
Sure,
no.
yeah, I'll do
why
that.
not? Do y'all, I've seen y'all get together and talk about your hunting trips and everything. Do y'all ride motorcycles and go? Is that how y'all do it?
He does. When I retired from the fire service, I started smelling Harley-Davidson brochures, and my wife, God bless her, she said, "Mr. Fireman, I want to tell you 2 things. She said, number 1 is that you like to go way too fast. Number 2 is that those things don't have red lights and sirens on them, and your reflexes aren't as good as they were when you were a young fella. So I leave the riding to him, and I'll just trust my 3/4 ton 4-wheel drive pickup."
Yeah, I don't blame you on that. Well, listen, Dennis, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your incredible wealth of knowledge and being so generous in that, because I think it'll be, again, a great asset to anyone who listens to this show. We really appreciate it.
All right, gentlemen. Well, listen, anytime, and I appreciate y'all having me on your show.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure.
Yes, thanks so much.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Check us out online at xpteamusa.com.
If you are in the market for a new pinpointer, then check out XP's MI6 pinpointer. Waterproof up to 6 meters, 2 audio modes, picture poles, 3 levels of sensitivity, rechargeable lithium battery, 7 programs to choose from, 7th program being connectivity to your machine, allowing 50 levels of sensitivity and recovery mode for your MI6. For those on a budget, check out the MI4 pinpointer with all the same options except for connectivity. So find an MI6 or an MI4 pinpointer through a dealer near you.
This is Express News with Kendall Edkins.
Hey folks, this is Kendall bringing you a new edition of Express News. If you're a treasure hunter, you've likely heard of Forrest Fenn and his treasure. But in case you haven't, here's the quick recap. Back in 2010, the eccentric millionaire claimed to have hidden a $2 million treasure somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. He went on to say that the treasure could be found using a series of clues hidden in his self-published memoir. The story gained national attention following claims of fraud, legal battles, and the untimely death of at least 4 treasure hunters. A new study by University of North Dakota professor Alan King suggests that over 2 million people are aware of the treasure, and a whopping 433,000 have in some way taken part in the search. King surveyed 2,000 of these treasure hunters, and his results show an amazing amount of commitment in the search for lost treasure. Over 80% said they had conducted a, quote, boots-on-the-ground search, and among that group, 13% indicated they had been on 20 or more such adventures. 78% said that the search had a positive impact on their lives, and 66% said they had, quote, gained new knowledge, skills, and or abilities from the chase. For more information, you can check out Professor King's study entitled Treasure Hunting as an American Subculture, The Thrill of the Chase. Our next story comes to us from across the planet, where XP user Jason Kemp has reunited longtime sweethearts with a friendship ring lost nearly 50 years ago. Glenda O'Brien lost the ring on Australia's Gold Coast way back in 1974. Glenda told ABC News, quote, "It meant a lot to me because I was so young back then. We fell in love at first sight. The ring was our unity ring, more so than our wedding ring or our engagement ring. It was given to her by her partner Phil. Glenda and her sweetheart picked out the ring and Phil had it engraved, but sadly she lost it while washing their first family car and never found it." Jason Kemp, a relatively new member of our XP family, found the ring in what's now a vacant lot. "I was pretty excited. It was the first gold ring I'd found. It was a good, solid, chunky ring. Then I saw the engraving on the inside, dated 1971, Kemp said. He decided to post his find to the Gold Coast community Facebook page, and 2 days later, Glenda and Phil contacted him with details of when and where she had lost it. Kemp's response, "Yup, it's yours." That's a fantastic recovery, Jason, and good on you for returning it to a grateful family. Our final story for tonight is certainly an exciting one for our friends down in Virginia. Starting in October of 2020, metal detectors will be allowed at Jamestown Beach Event Park. The previous county code prohibited the use of metal detectors at county parks, but a new change allows the Parks and Rec Director to allow detecting at designated areas. Parks Administrator Alistair Perkinson told the Virginia Gazette, quote, "We've been approached by citizens in the past about the activity, and we started to research and look at other localities on the peninsula. We found that most, if not all, do allow metal detecting. The Board of Supervisors still needs to approve the ordinance change, but if all goes according to plan, a portion of the beach will be designated for metal detecting use between the months of October and April. James City County does not have any plans to require permits or fees to metal detect on the beach, but rules and regulations are being drafted by the Parks Department. For more on this story, check out the Virginia Gazette." Well, that's a wrap for this edition of Express News. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
All right, and that was Kendall Edkins with the Express News. I think he did a great job.
I think he did a fantastic job. I think my shoes are filled and maybe even in a better way. Really good stuff.
Yeah, and Dennis Wynne, that was awesome talking with him. He's got some really cool techniques and I learned a lot from it.
He does, and I'll tell you, back-to-back shows, we've been talking about drones, and I think I'm just a couple months away from getting one. I really need to get one and check it out.
Yeah, I haven't flown mine in a while, and I need to get it on a charger, get the batteries charging, and get it out there and start flying it, because I'm kind of in the mood flying mine, too. I've been seeing Lenny Quaylen, and he's been flying his. He went and bought one, and he's been flying it and then showing it off. And now I'm starting to get the fever again. I need to charge mine up and get it out there.
Yeah, I think they offer a great perspective, not just for scouting, but just to, the area that you're covering, you don't get to see it from that bird's eye. So I think it's really, really cool just to have that visual. Hey, and I just want to remind everybody, every Sunday night and every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Josh Kimmel and Beyond Sight and Sound. It's an awesome podcast. Check it out. He goes on live. He's got a great live chat. So show him some love and check out his podcast.
Yeah, and you can find him on Spreaker or any other podcasting platform that you can download on your phone. It's a very great show. If you go on Spreaker, you can interact with the chat and the live, and while the show is live, and a lot of people are on there chatting, so it's really cool and interactive.
Yeah, definitely check it out if you haven't already.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all we got for today, and we will see everybody March 20th, and we'll see you then.
Take care.
Bye.
Get that permission, put the coil to the soil, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Metal Detecting Podcast, brought to you by XP Metal Detectors.